Can we have a huge round of applause for Governor Lee?
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So, Governor, it's your second time at Bitcoin Park. Welcome back.
Thank you. This is a little more, even maybe a more packed room than last time, but I loved hearing from where all this audience has come. It's very exciting to us in Tennessee when we get to host people from around the country and the world, so thank you for coming.
Wonderful. So I thought an interesting place to start is you were born here, well, in Franklin, 1959 on a ranch. How did that shape your life and bring you to the place you are today?
Yeah. My family's a seventh generation. I'm a seventh generation. So cool story is the guy, Braxton Lee, the pioneer that came from Virginia to Tennessee and settled on the banks of the Cumberland River, happened to settle in 1796. That's the year Tennessee was created. So my family's been here ever since. We're in the cattle business and I'm a mechanical engineer. We're in the engineering and mechanical services business. I was before I changed jobs. And so I grew up not far from here and went to engineering school, got involved in a family business, got involved in understanding the government's role in how it can be a hindrance or a help. Actually, I lived a really great life. Wife, kids, farm, Tennessee, doesn't get any better. My wife was killed. I reevaluated my life and what it was about. Got involved in nonprofit work and inner city kids and Haiti and Africa and Mexico and how do you live your life to the fullest, and that led to inner city public education policy or criminal justice reform prison policy, and one thing led to another, and I thought, you know what the heck, I should run for governor and see if we can make a difference. So that's why I'm sitting here.
It's a really incredibly inspiring story. I was trying to do a little bit of research before this interview, and I was just amazed about your life path and what you've been through and what you've overcome and how you have improved Tennessee. A little bit about myself. I moved here with my family about 4 years ago, and I was a crazy person, so I started Bitcoin Park with Rod 7 months later. And as you can see, the momentum in Tennessee has been absolutely massive. It's hard for me to imagine what Nashville and Tennessee was like in the 60s. And I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, like how you see the progress that has been made. Have there been mistakes? What's the progress? Like, where are we today, Tennessee, 60 years later, versus the town you grew up in?
I have thought about that. Obviously, when you're in my position, you think about the transition of your state. So in the 60s, when I was a kid, I always tell people we had one building that was taller than 5 stories or something. The Life and Casualty building, I think, was built in maybe 57 or 59 or something like that. And we had this one skyscraper for 20 years. And that's what downtown Nashville was to me growing up. So the transformation's been remarkable. But for some unique reason, and I'm not sure what it is, but Tennessee has had a kind of a long history of very innovative thinkers and people, even from some of the original founders. And the way that translated out in my sort of adult life has been, when you think about companies like Hospital Corporation of America, the HCA was a business launched in Nashville that transformed the healthcare industry. It became the largest hospital-owned company in the world. Had hospitals all over the world and just really transformed the way healthcare was delivered. You think companies like Ingram, which have been a long Nashville family. The Frists were the healthcare people. The Ingrams, they took what was so publishing was always a massive industry in this city, and in part because of religious publishing. So we had Baptist Publishing House and Methodist Publishing House, and they published all the books for all of the churches all over America. So we had this robust, but the Ingram Group transformed publishing to digital. That they really were the leading company that decided to take books and make them digital and begin to sell them on Amazon and that sort of thing. So you've got things like healthcare and publishing and the nuclear industry, which matters a lot to the people in this room, I would expect. And I want to talk about that in a minute. But, I mean, the Manhattan Project was really born in Oak Ridge. And the innovation that came from Oak Ridge and that's beginning to come again in Oak Ridge as we, reestablish ourselves as the epicenter of nuclear energy. This state has a innovation history. So when I think about this group, as much as I laugh with my team because I make them brief me for like an hour on all the things that you all do, and then I'll start over and go, okay, do that all over again. And I remember when I used to try to teach my daughter math, and she would say, "Dad, I can tell you're scratching your head, you're frustrated." I can see my policy director going, "He's asked me again to explain it." But I will say, I'm a mechanical engineer. I took a class on Einstein's theories of relativity back when I was 19, and it was a fascinating class for me. It was one of those where you sit there and you look at the board all filled with stuff and you're like, can I really understand that up there? Like you kind of surprise yourself, but when someone brings it to you one step at a time, you kind of get it. And what we all know, or what what I know about Einstein was he really he challenged conventional thinking. So we had Newtonian physics and we had all kind of these principles that had lived for a long time. And then he said, I think it's different than that. I think these theories of space and time and the earth have all been fixed in place forever according to Newton's theories and principles. And he said, no, I think they're relative to one another. And he was right. And it changed the way we think about science. It didn't change truths and principles that were there before, but it did challenge some of those truths. And I kind of came away from that class going, that is the way I want to think for the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to be stuck in the conventional thinking. So when I think about what's happening here, I don't understand it. I do. It's at a base level, and it's very exciting to me. But what it really is for me, I came to government and all of a sudden inherited 23 departments. I was a mechanical contractor, plumbers, pipe fitters, welders, engineers, all that stuff, construction, Department of Health, Department of Labor, Department of the Interior, Department of this, Department of that. And, I realized I didn't have to understand everything about every one of those things, but that we could, as a state, we could kind of innovate in those ways and change. That's how I feel about what's going on here. I am trying to understand it deeper, but I'm excited about innovative, forward-thinking, technology-changing ideas that are kind of the way Einstein thinks.
So, let's talk about that a little bit. What we're kind of seeing right now in the States is there's a bit of a space race between states, right? And right now in Texas and Tennessee, we're starting to see kind of these epicenters of Bitcoin innovation happen and Bitcoin adoption and companies moving to friendlier jurisdictions. And a key aspect of that is energy cost, energy reliability, the robustness of the infrastructure. How do you think about energy innovation and energy policy in Tennessee?
I talked to a lot of companies that are moving here. Yesterday, we did a ribbon cutting on a Korean company that's investing here, created a big facility manufacturing electrolytes for batteries. And whenever we talk to companies from either around the world or in the United States, they want to know if we have the workers and do we have the energy. Because they know, like most people know, that the fragility, the nature of the grid right now is such that if we don't innovate, my State of the State address is in 2 weeks, and I'm sure everyone will be watching it. My team tells me when I get all nervous to go out and do my State of the State, they're like, "Remember, sir, dozens of people are going to be watching it." And now I've come to believe, that was the first time. Now I've come to believe, well, that's absolutely the truth. So, but I lost my train of thought. So I think that, and we're talking about innovation in our State of the State. I think that when you recognize where the grid is, you better be thinking about how you're going to strengthen your grid. I think about it from a national standpoint. I actually think national security, national economic development, everything from the nation's energy security importance. It has to start somewhere. I'd like it to start in Tennessee. Nuclear energy is the clean energy that's bipartisan, non-controversial, whatever. I mean, I'm an all of the above guy. I think we ought to have every, we ought to pursue every strategy energy-wise. But one of those all of the above is nuclear. And Tennessee's uniquely positioned to do that. We already have 42% of our grid is nuclear-based in our state. And that's in part because of what's been going on at Oak Ridge for the last, 75, 90 years. And we have a unique community there that understands nuclear, that desires for it. We have the only undeveloped but federally approved nuclear site in the country, and I hope that will be a developed nuclear site soon. In fact, next week on the 4th, I'm having 3 governors, multiple massive national utility companies, major technology private sector users for a kind of a summit, or it's really just a meeting together with us to say, what are we going to do together collectively as the southern states to which all these companies are moving, and of which we all need the power. And first of a kind costs for small modular reactors are enormous, but second and third and fourth and fifth. So if we ordered 6 or 7 together, the 3 of us or 4 of us, maybe we could lower costs. So that I created the General Assembly and myself created the Nuclear Energy Advisory Council of national experts around the world, a nuclear energy fund, which we seed money, $50 million put in it, to attract industry, companies in the production, in all things nuclear to Tennessee. Cairo, Sex Energy, Orano, the massive, major, cutting-edge nuclear engineering and technology companies are making the decision to come here. I want Tennessee to be the center of that. And for our own grid, but also for the nation. So, yeah, it matters a lot that we invest in energy.
Let's go.
I mean, so you said nuclear a lot. Do you?
Sorry.
Do you think
I didn't say nuclear, which drives me crazy when people do that. I do have a southern accent, but I get that word right.
I love it.
My son worked for a nuclear engineering firm, so he always is like trying to school me on. He goes, "Dad, don't talk like you're an expert in nuclear. Let me tell you what you don't know."
Well, what I was going to ask is, do you? I don't know if it's my bias or the bubble that I'm in, but do you feel like momentum's changing there? To me, it feels like a lot of progress has been made over the last 2 years, even just from a narrative point of view.
I think that's right. I think I think the seriousness of the grid issue has come to light for most people that have anything to do with that grid. So for us, TVA has kind of come to us and said, if we don't manage this process, then we can't, for example, have that company locate here. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm flying all over the world trying to get companies to come here and people like you to come here. And I can't afford, and we have one of the best reliable energy grids in the country. We can't afford to slow that down at all. So thus the urgency to get this done. I mean, it's probably the most important thing that we should be investing in as a state if we care about our people having opportunity and jobs going forward.
Love it. So to Bitcoiners, we probably have three tenets of our political priorities, right? We have energy infrastructure, we have personal property rights, and then the last but definitely not least is tax policy. How have you thought about tax policy during your tenure as governor? How do you think about it going forward? Where does Tennessee sit here in terms of competition between the states?
So one of the answers to that is kind of ideological, which is I kind of think people know better how to spend their money than the government does. So to the degree that we can, and I know that a lot more now that I've been the government for 6 years. To the degree that we can keep dollars in the hands of businesses, entrepreneurs, moms, I don't care who you are, to the degree that we can keep your dollars in your hands and let you spend them, you're going to have more interest in them being spent well than the government would have on your behalf. That's the ideological reason why you got to have low taxes because of that. Secondly, I think that, well, if you believe that, then people do spend their money. I mean, I ran a business for 25 years, worked there 35 years, own it. I need the revenue and the capital that I have in my business to invest in next year's revenue. I need that to invest in, and I don't need to give it to the government to invest in the things that are important. I do at some level, but there needs to be a really good balance there. So I try to think about that as tax policy. There are things government needs to do. We need to build roads. We need to build bridges. We need to expand the internet access for technology all over the state. We need to, we can list off all the things that are we need to educate children. We need to provide for that environment. There are things we're supposed to do. We need to do it well. We need to have tax dollars to do that. So I get that appropriate mix there. But to the degree that we can keep our taxes down and serve the people with the services that they expect us to serve them with, like roads and bridges and highways and education, then that's kind of the real balance. We are the lowest, depends on how you measure it, right? By any measure, we're in the top 5 lowest tax rate per capita states in the country. So our citizens, as a percentage of personal income, pay less in taxes than citizens of at least 45 other states. We just lowered business taxes. I believe that I am a philosophical believer that when you put taxes back in the hands of users, they will invest them in ways that are better for the economy, better for the people, better for the state. Then that's just a smaller government philosophy. We have one here in this state like that.
So, Governor, I know your time is precious. So one last question.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us.
My alternative is to go back to the Capitol. So
it's a little bit better. Before we wrap up here, there's plenty of people in this room that are thinking about moving their families, moving their businesses to Tennessee. What is your pitch to them to consider this great state?
One of the things that I mean, as someone who grew up here and lived here all my life and had seventh generation, and gosh, there's not a better place in all of the world to live. And it's beautiful. We're going to keep it beautiful. I have a whole conservation strategy, by the way, that we won't talk about today, but we have to be innovative, attracting companies, attracting business, have the fastest growing economy in America, have the lowest debts, and we have to preserve all that so that my great-grandchildren will still have the most beautiful place in America to live. But and so we are committed to that as well. It's a reason to consider where someone's going to move. There's something about maybe it's just because I live here, but there's something about a way of life here. I met a guy who was had just moved his family here from New York, and with no disrespect to anybody from New York here, but he said he was like, you know what, Governor, I just moved my family here, and I feel like I've moved back to America. And I said, you know what, that's what you want to have right there. It's a great place to live, and I wish you all would come here. It's great.
So I'm going to ask one question and then maybe closing thoughts real quick, and then we'll wrap. First of all, I think you called a special session on Monday, so thank you for being here. I was nervous that you're going to be a little too busy.
Today may be the most important vote, or no, it's not true.
That's what I was going to ask you about, the Educational Freedom Act, especially if someone with 4 kids, other people have a number of kids. You're talking about putting money back in our pockets. Maybe you could just touch on that.
Yeah.
And then maybe touch on the nuclear side for a lot of these folks that are allocating millions, if not billions of dollars in investment in infrastructure, potentially here in the state.
Yep.
Maybe touch on both of them.
Yep. Education freedom, I do think that people ought to decide where their kids go to school, not the government. And government has a responsibility to educate kids. We have a responsibility to create an environment where kids can be educated. But I think we can create that environment for them to be educated and then let you choose how your kid's educated. You pay taxes, they go to education. If you want to send your kid to a private school, then you ought to be able to use your tax dollars to do that. That's just what I think. I've homeschooled my kids, I private schooled my kids, and I public schooled my kids. And because every kid's different, every classroom's different, all that freedom of choice for education. So in 2019, when I first got elected, my first State of the State address, which was 7 State of States ago, I said we should have education freedom in Tennessee, and we ought to have it this year. Today, by 2 o'clock, hopefully, we will have education freedom in Tennessee. There'll be a vote today on this issue. And I'm a person who believes that, look, I know that 90% of our kids in this state are going to be in our public schools, which, by the way, are outperforming the national average in recovery from COVID. Yesterday, a big story about that. But 90% of our kids are going to go to public schools. We should have the best ones in the country. We should invest heavily in them. We have teacher pay raises. My wife is a former teacher. Like, this idea that we have to be against public schools to be for educational choice is a false narrative. So I'm a guy that says, hey, we can have both, and we're going to. So hopefully, it's a really big day for me. I'm excited to be here, and frankly, I'm glad to be out of the Capitol because I'm so tired of talking about this subject. It's going to happen. Nuclear energy, I think we talked on that a little bit. I met the new energy secretary, and frankly, I had a good relationship with the federal former energy secretary. It's a bipartisan issue that is just, I think one of the reasons we're seeing it happen is because people have discovered that we have to have energy independence in America to have national security in America and to have economic development in America and all the things. All the stuff that has to happen, and a lot of it revolves around energy. Just like these companies say, do you have the workers? Do you have the energy? And if you do, then I might come here. And when you're competing with Texas and Florida and whatever, you got to have it. And you got to have a strategy for workforce development, for high-tech workforce development, or plumbers. And we've But we could talk about that a long time too, how we're kind of trying to change the way high school looks in Tennessee, and we've put billions of dollars investment there. So nuclear energy is a key part of the energy for America's future, and I do want it to be right here in the center.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I'm going to pass it back to Matt in a second. I just want to give a shout out to Michael Hendricks, Elizabeth, Madeline, whoever's from the governor's team. Can you guys give them a round of applause? They're the ones that...
Yeah, Michael is the one that kind of has to scratch his head while I'm saying that. Tell me that again.
So your COO, Brandon Gibson, will be here in attendance tomorrow.
Good. Oh, good.
So I think she's heading up and doing a bunch of stuff on the nuclear, so we're excited to have her.
She is. She really is kind of she's organizing this event coming together, but she's also she's a really smart lady. You're gonna love hearing from her. She's a brilliant thinker, and she has much to do with our strategy going forward to lead the country in new nuclear and new nuclear technology.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Lee, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So everyone, please sit down.